Hi, welcome. We are going to talk about the supernatural today, and we're recording this also for part of my podcast. So this is going to be a double thing today, but I'm recording this for my podcast, What's Up with Dr. Rupp. So you can check that out. So today we're going to talk about the supernatural. Like I said, we're going to talk about the good, the bad, and the ugly. People are absolutely fascinated with the supernatural. Everywhere you look, you see different things that have themes that are supernatural. You've got stuff with werewolves and vampires and witches and, stuff with witchcraft. There's Harry Potter books and movies. There's all kinds of witchcraft themes have infiltrated even little kids' cartoons. It's everywhere that you look anymore. There's all kinds of different stuff with ghosts. There are ghost hunter shows. There's like horror movies and movies that have like poltergeist and things with demonic spirits when people are possessed. So all that kind of stuff, even stuff with aliens, it's all taken over, all different forms of media with books, movies, you name it, it's there. So because of the fascination with something that seems exciting and secretive, people often start to experiment with the supernatural, not realizing what they are getting into. They'll get into witchcraft and the occult thinking it's harmless but fun and, just something to experiment with. And they don't even realize where the power source is that they're using, what they're drawing from, and the things that it can open the door to. So we're going to talk about that kind of different stuff. We're going to talk about different things throughout this whole series with different supernatural elements like New Age practices, Ouija boards, tarot cards, seances, all kinds of different stuff like that. So I know when I was young, people were starting off really young. So when I would go to sleepovers when I was little, we would, the girls would always want to play with Ouija boards. They would want to play the levitation game, light as a feather, stiff as a board. They would want to do the Bloody Mary game where you're trying to conjure up something in the mirror. So that kind of stuff was going on even when I was little, but you're hearing way more about it now. And little kids, even kids, my daughter's age, 13, 14, around that age, they're trying to do their own seances and stuff. So it's pretty crazy. But people do realize that there's a supernatural realm, but they haven't been taught about it, about where it originates from, how it operates. And again, like I said, what power source they are drawing the power from. So we're going to talk about all of that. We're going to explore that, and we're going to try to get to what's the truth and what's okay, what's not. And so we're going to delve into that a little bit. So let me just start off by saying that God, the creator of the universe, he is a supernatural being. He has always existed. He always will exist. He's an eternal being. He's not going to ever go away. He just always was and always will be. So he will exist forever. And he created other supernatural beings. He created angels, which are a supernatural being. He created humans as well, but he created angels to help mankind, to be assistants to mankind. And 1/3 of the angels rebelled and were cast out of heaven along with Lucifer. So Lucifer was a created being, an angel. He rebelled against God, and him and 1/3 of the angels were cast out of heaven together. So we now call him Satan. His little minions, his followers, we call those demons. The fallen angels we call demons. And so the Bible says that 1/3 of the angels were cast out with him, and that leaves 2/3 of the angels to still do God's bidding. So there's an entire invisible world. It's good against evil. It's God with his angels, and then Christian believers against the devil and his minions, the demons. And then he recruits humans to help him out in his endeavors. People who are not believers, who are not saved, or who practice things like witchcraft and the occult. So the greatest lie that I believe the devil has perpetuated is that he doesn't exist. The Bible says if you resist the devil, that he will flee, but you won't resist him, you won't fight him if you don't think that he exists. So we're going to talk a little bit about him and his power, what's really going on, how to interact with the supernatural activity, the invisible realm that is constantly going on around us. Even the Bible, it's a supernatural book. And there's a pastor, his name's Jim Baker. He's a pastor, and he's also the founder of the Wealth with God coaching program. And he gave an interesting demonstration about the supernatural qualities of the Bible in one of his sermons. He showed up to one of his sermons to do the sermon, and he had a leather-bound book. And he told the congregants that he had wandered into a New Age bookstore, and he had found this book of spells, and that he wanted to read one of the spells to them. And so people started freaking out. One woman even got up to leave, and she vocalized to the attendees in the room that she was not going to listen to that. So he quickly let them know that he was just kidding, and that it was actually his journal. It was not a spell book. And his point was made. They had expected something supernatural to be released if a spell was read from a spell book. And so he was making the point that the Bible is a supernatural book, and when it's read out loud, you should expect something supernatural as well with that. And some kind of a supernatural release when that's read out loud. So going back to the Bible a little bit, there are all kinds of supernatural events recorded in the Bible. The Bible is absolutely full of supernatural events. So even starting the first book of the Bible, the book of Genesis, it says that God spoke the world into existence. So you have this supernatural being, God, who with his words, he spoke some words and created things. So he spoke and he said, "Let there be light," and there was. He said, "Let there be light," and the sun, moon, and stars were created and appeared. He said, "Let the land produce vegetation," and we got trees and bushes and flowers, and it all just appeared. And so seriously, with just that, just creation, we could just stop right there because it was so supernatural how God just spoke the world into being and into existence. And there's all kinds of other supernatural stories in the Bible. There's Jesus turned water into wine. He multiplied just a teeny little bit of food, enough to feed more than 5,000 people. There were all kinds of miraculous physical healings that happened in the Bible. Several different times, people were dead, and they were raised from the dead and brought back to life. Lots of different stories in the Bible about casting demons out of people. There was walking on water. Peter and Jesus walked on top of the water. There's a couple different instances of teleportation in the Bible. There was when manna fell from the sky for 40 years. God provided manna for them to eat in the desert, in the wilderness, the Israelites, as well as he brought forth water. When Moses hit a rock, the rock started spouting forth water. And when they camped out at Marah, the water was bitter there, and Moses threw a piece of wood into the water. And so this bitter water, by him throwing a piece of wood into the water, supernaturally made the water fit to drink and no longer bitter. Kind of the same thing happened with Elisha when they had a stew. They had made this stew, but they said that there was poison, death or poison in the pot, that the stew was poisonous. And Elisha threw a little bit of flour into the pot, and then the stew was fit to eat. So if something is poisonous and he just throws a little bit of flour into the pot and then all of a sudden it's fit to eat, that's supernatural. Flour by itself does not take something that's poisonous and make it not poisonous. So there's another instance where Paul was bitten by a poisonous snake, and people were watching, expecting him to die. They knew it was a poisonous snake. They knew what happened when people got bit by this kind of snake before. And he had no ill effects. God had completely, protected him and caused no harm to his body. There's the story of how Elisha was helping the widow woman, and oil in a jar that was almost completely empty just kept flowing and flowing to fill other jars until all the jars were full. There was a situation where, again with Elisha, where they had been chopping wood, and with the axe, the head of the axe fell off into the water, and this big heavy piece of metal sunk. But Elisha threw a piece of wood into the water, and it caused this axe head to float to the surface so they could retrieve it. So that, again, totally supernatural. God parting the Red Sea. He completely split the water apart so people could walk through on dry ground. That's supernatural. People were struck blind for a time and then healed. That happened multiple times in the Bible. There's all kinds of stories in the Bible about angels, those supernatural beings, and the things that they did, how they would, fight in wars, how they would bring messages to people, how they would appear and talk to people and come to rescue people. So all kinds of stories about angels, all kinds of stories about demons in the Bible and the things that they did and how they had to be cast out of people. Speaking in other tongues, that is a supernatural gift of the Spirit. We're going to talk about that and some of the other supernatural gifts. And then during Moses' time, we're going to talk about not just during his time, but there were sorcerers and magicians that he went up against in his time who could do similar things to what he could do. But the miracles that he did, they were powered by God, whereas these sorcerers and magicians, they were getting their power from demonic spirits. And so the Bible says that there will be false signs and wonders, and some of those false signs, well, all of the false signs and wonders are performed by the devil. So there is a real devil. He does have some power, but he can only counterfeit what God has created. So God created everything, and anything that the devil has with any of his power, it's a counterfeit of what God has done. So like the gift of prophecy, one of the gifts of the Spirit, that's counterfeited by the devil with fortune telling. And so that's one of the ways that that gift is perverted and used by the devil instead of God. And we are also going to talk about what happens when you experiment with the supernatural. If you don't have a good biblical foundation, you don't know what's okay, what's not. You don't realize that if you do things that God says are not okay, what you're opening the door to. So if you do things that God has said don't do, or that God hasn't specifically said are okay for us to do, if we're seeking them out instead of having God initiate them, it can open the door to demonic spirits attacking and tormenting you. So you can easily be seduced into that kind of stuff. So we have to figure out what we're doing, if it's okay, if it's God's power or the devil's power. And if God told us to do it, if he gave us permission, if he said it's okay, then it's okay. Like he told us to heal the sick. He didn't say pray for the sick. He said heal for the sick. And when we lay hands on people, we should expect his power to go into people to heal them. So he told us to heal the sick. He told us to cast out demons, to raise the dead. He gave us different gifts of the Spirit, including speaking in tongues. So that's a supernatural language that you wouldn't have known on your own if God hadn't given you that gift of tongues. And then there's other gifts of the Spirit that we'll talk about, like the gift of prophecy and the gift of discerning of spirits. So we'll talk about all those different gifts. But the big key is who initiated it. Did God initiate it? And did God say, do this thing? Or are we seeking it out and trying to initiate it if God hasn't specifically told us that it's okay for us to do? Because if it's us initiating, and if we're not using God's power, then we're using the devil's power, and that's the wrong power to be pulling from. So we're going to wrap this up for today. I am going to post a link on my Facebook page. It's at Dr. Melissa Rupp on Facebook. So you can go there. I'm going to post a link and you can ask different questions. And then I'm going to hop on here on Thursday and answer some of those questions for you. So make sure you go there, check that out, post any questions that you have, and we will answer those on Thursday. Thanks.